What's up, carp freaks? Hopefully by now you've seen the challenge special on the new Edges DVD, the Carpy challenge, where I had to catch carp from venues that spelt out the word Carpy. But because the challenge was very much a race against time, I wasn't really able to cover the rigs in as much detail as I would have liked. So in this video, what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of recap some of the key moments of that challenge and just cover the rigs that I used in much greater detail. Now, the challenge began on Rising Sun fishery up in North Yorkshire, and I had started that session off using solid PVA bag tactics, which I thought would get me a bite very quickly, then we could get on the road and get on to the next venue. But it didn't really happen that way. The solid bags just attracted the attention of every other species in the lake. I caught tench, I caught bream, I caught crucians, I caught weird hybrid looking things, and the carp just weren't interested in the solid bag approach. Couldn't really keep a rod in the water for long enough. So I changed over to an out and out boilie approach with a snowman hook bait, scattered boilies over the top, and well, if you haven't seen the video, I won't ruin it for you, but it kind of produced results pretty quickly. So here's the rig I used from a little snowman setup. Very, very simple. I had an inline lead, and then coming down from that, we have a quick change swivel, and the hook link material I used is a new prototype material, which should be coming out pretty soon, and that's the Camo semi-stiff. This is the £20 light coloured hook link. I have a long loop on the end there, and the reason I like this long loop is it's doubled over, so it's double the stiffness. And I find when using a critically balanced hook bait like I'm using here, that sort of extra stiffness creates a bit of a boom section. It kind of pushes, you can see there how it's stiff, it pushes the hook bait away from the lead. I have a little bit of putty there as well, just to keep it pinned down nicely. And moving down, we have a size 6 SS BP hook, short shank, beaked point, and over the eye there we have one of the new micro liner sleeves, and that really does improve the hooking potential massively. It enables the hook to turn. You can see there it turns straight away, catches a hold, and whether it actually performs in that way underwater I don't know, but it certainly improves my confidence. Then we just have a small piece of silicone over the shank to create a bit of a blowback effect. And then I just used I think I was using hybrid at the time, a hybrid boilie topped off with a little fluoro cell pop up there. And that's what did the biz. Now I went on from Rising Sun over to the A1 pits, and I kind of went in using pretty much identical tactics. Having been punished by bream and various other species, I didn't really want to repeat on the A1 pit, so I went straight in with these tactics. And also time was very much of the essence. I was trying to get a rod in the water before it got dark, so it meant I didn't have to strip everything down and tackle up. But I was confident in this approach, having caught that fish from the previous venue. The only sort of slight change I made, I incorporated a leader, just a short 2 or 3 feet leader of the Trans-Carpy Illusion. The water clarity was much clearer over on the pits, and with the Trans-Carpy Illusion it is virtually invisible in water. Plus I was only fishing at short range, just sort of 20 yard range, 30 yard max I think it was, and this just meant by fishing with a semi-slack line, this Trans-Carpy Illusion sinks like a brick, so it meant that last sort of few feet of line would be pinned down on the lake bed, out of harm's way and virtually undetectable. So that worked a treat on 2 of the venues, and then we went on to Northie Park, where I used something a little bit different, and we'll take a look at that now. Well, this is the rig I used over on Patson's Syndicate at Northie Park, and it's the £20 Camo semi-stiff again. We have the doubled over loop section there at the end to create the extra stiffness, And because I'm using a wafter, a slow swinging hook bait, this stiff section at the end creates like a boom, if you like, that pushes it the maximum distance away from the lead. Coming down, once again, we have the micro liner sleeve, small piece of silicone over the shank there to create a blowback, and the hook, I went up to a size 4 SSBP. Patterns is a very weedy water, so I wanted something with that extra strength so I could move them safely out of the weed. And the hook bait there was a salty squid wafter. Now it worked a treat, but this wasn't how I started off the session. Because I'd never fished Patterns before, even though I was a syndicate member, I'd never fished it before. I kind of went in with tactics I knew would work, or thought would work, rigs I had confidence in. So I started off using the hinge stiff rig, but it was obvious it wasn't really going to plan, and I think the reasons behind that was the spots I was fishing were so small, just sort of bin lid size clear areas, and I think that presentation was just far too blatant. A white pop-up sitting up an inch or two on a clear area. I think it's a setup that the carp were encountering almost on a daily basis, and I just felt that perhaps we're just shying away. It was just too obvious. So I changed over to the washed out pink wafter, and I think it was only an hour after making the change that it produced the goods. So I obviously got it right on that occasion. And from there, we went on to the next venue, and that was the Yeoman's Syndicate in Oxfordshire, and that required a different rig once again. When we arrived at the Yeoman's Syndicate on the linear complex, it was fairly late in the day, and I felt that the best approach to get a quick bite was kind of how we started the challenge, really, and that was using solid PVA bags. I fished the linear complex quite a bit over the years, not on Yeoman's Lake, but I've never had any problem with nuisance species, bream or tent, so I felt on this occasion I could get away with using the PVA bag approach. We had a good scout around, saw a few fish showing and cast PVA bags to them, and I was quite surprised when it never paid off really quickly. I did expect to get a quick bite and be on the road, but it wasn't until after an hour one of the bailiffs come round and he said he'd seen quite a lot of fish at the complete opposite end of the lake on the back of the wind. So I had a look up there and he was right, there was a lot of fish up that end, and by the time I got moved around it was virtually dark. So all I did, I just sort of waited until I heard a fish show and then just cast solid PVA bags in the direction of where the fish were showing, really. And this was the rig I was using. Again, there's kind of a theme kind of showing here, a pattern emerging, in that all the rigs I use are very, very simple. All we have here is a 3-ounce inline lead and a short 3.5 inch section of 25-pound reflex braid. That goes down to a size 4 SSBP hook, which balances out nicely these 2 grains of artificial corn. You see I've got a small section of silicone here, and that not only creates a blowback effect, but the positioning of this tubing greatly affects the way the hook bait sits. If I was to have the tubing kind of on the bend of the shank there, what you find is that the hook can perhaps sit straight up and face back towards the hook link, or it can sit off at a weird angle. But by moving it away just before the bend, you find that the hook bait pops up and the hook point faces down, so it's almost like a claw. And I just find the hooking potential of that rig is superb. It doesn't need anything else. Nothing else is going to improve the mechanics of this rig in my mind. The inclusion of any shrink tube, it's just not necessary. So that sits absolutely perfect. And when it's inside a solid PVA bag, once that PVA dissolves, you have a little tiny patch of feed, and what you find is there's just that yellow sort of sight bob just visible through the patch of feed there, something for the carp to home in on. And I think what happens a lot of the time, there's a patch of feed, they pick up the hook bait, quite often purely by accident did they see a patch of feed there, and unbeknown to them, that happens to contain a rig, and it's kind of game over. So yes, that is what did the business over on Yeoman's, and we then had a drive into another country where I used another rig to finish the challenge. Because the challenge was running quite smoothly for me, Lewis decided he would spice things up a bit just to try and make things a little bit more difficult, and he came up with the stipulation that one of the venues I had to fish couldn't be in this country. It kind of confused me a bit at first, I'm not going to lie. I maybe thought I had to go to France, but then I worked out I could just nip over to Wales. So we went from Yeoman's over to Cefn Mabli fishery in Wales, and from quite early on I realised zigs were going to be the way forward. As soon as the sun was up, there was fish cruising around all over, and I managed to hook a fish very quickly on a zig, but unfortunately the hook pulled, and from here on things began to slip away from me, I felt. Now, we only had the peg we were in just for a few hours, and then that swim had been booked, and we would have to move at the opposite end of the lake where I hadn't seen any signs of life at all. There was no carp there at all. So the way I looked at it, although we did have another night on the venue, the reality was we didn't. I felt I had as long as I was in that swim to pass the challenge, or it was game over. And as the day wore on, it got warmer and warmer, and all the fish were cruising around backs out of the water on the surface. Perfect for a bit of floater fishing, but one of the rules on Cefn Mabli is you're not allowed to fish on the surface. No floater fishing at all. So, perhaps a little bit cheeky, I had a bit of a plumb around, and I found that the depth was virtually exactly 7 feet. No matter where I plumbed, it was 7 feet deep. So I set my zigs to fish at 6'10", so 2 inches under the surface. Now the rigs I used, the zigs I used were the Zigger liners. Again, quite a big hook. I think that's a size 5 SSBP, and a little black Zigger liner that's attached to the 12-pound Zig and Floater line. And yeah, they were set to fish 2 inches under the surface, and if memory serves me right, I think we had 20 minutes before I had to vacate the swim. Rod rattles off, and that was it. Done, dusted, finished, complete, relax. So yeah, it all ended very well. It all ran a little bit too smoothly, I think, for Harry and Lewis's liking. But yeah, it was challenge complete. Hope you enjoyed watching the video. I'm sure next time they'll make things a lot more difficult. If you'd like to watch more videos from Fox Fishing TV, then click the link here. Or if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, then click the link here.